Hello everyone, today I bring you a video about Hùng and Hoài Ca. Today's video reveals Hoài Ca's background, so please watch until the end. Hoài Ca asked Tu Dung to go with her to the old plot of land to harvest sugarcane, a place that had been part of their lives since they were very young. Early that morning, Hoài Ca carefully prepared everything, from the machete for cutting cane, plastic containers for water, to a small stove used for cooking syrup. She planned to press the cane for juice and boil it down into bottles of golden syrup for the upcoming Lunar New Year, some to keep at home, the rest for Tu Dung to take back as gifts for her mother. To Hoài Ca, this was not just a simple countryside gift, but a gesture of care, a sincere way of showing affection to the family of the younger sister who had relied on her for so many years. Tu Dung arrived later than expected. That morning, she had to work extra hours at a small eatery near the market. With the year-end rush, customers came and went non-stop, making the work more exhausting than usual. Her hands still smelled of cooking oil, her clothes were damp with sweat, and her steps were slower from fatigue. Yet when she saw Hoài Ca waiting in the familiar field, a bright smile spread across Tu Dung's face. Despite the tiredness, she felt happy, because all she wanted was to earn a little more money to give her mother a fuller tet, with a few more sweets, some meat and fish, so their small home wouldn't feel too empty at the start of the new year. In the vast sugarcane field, the two sisters began their familiar work. Cane stalks were cut down and neatly stacked into bundles. The steady sound of blades striking dry stalks blended with the gentle breeze moving through the remaining rows. They took turns pressing the cane, sweet juice flowing out and glinting under the pale year-end sunlight. During short breaks, they bent down to pick fresh green mustard leaves along the edge of the field, tender shoots still heavy with morning dew, carrying the familiar scent of damp village soil. As they worked, they chatted about everyday things. Tu Dung talked about her part-time job at the eatery, long hours at the stove, endless carrying until her arms went numb, difficult customers, and also the kind ones who tipped a little extra. Hoài Ca listened attentively, occasionally asking a question, then sharing stories of her own, about trading agricultural products, the fluctuating price of sugarcane this year, and how early-season greens were fetching better prices than usual. The conversation flowed naturally, nothing grand, just about making a living and simple plans for the Tet holiday that was drawing very near. The hard work brought beads of sweat to their foreheads, soaking their shirts, yet the atmosphere between them felt unexpectedly warm. In the wide open field, soft laughter drifted through the air, easing the fatigue. Hoài Ca paid attention to every small detail, quietly giving Tu Dung the better share, from the freshest bunches of greens to the carefully filled bottles of fragrant cane syrup. She said nothing, simply arranging everything silently, as if by long-formed habit, a way of sharing burdens she never felt the need to explain. Watching Tu Dung carefully tie each bottle of syrup, her eyes shining with simple joy, Hoài Ca smiled softly. In that moment, amid the calm sugarcane field, they both understood that what they had might not be much, but it was earned through effort and through a bond of family that had carried them through many hardships. And from these very ordinary moments, from stories not yet fully told, old memories slowly resurfaced, preparing to reveal deeper truths about Hoài Ca's life in the chapters to come. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Hùng quietly brought the wallet he had found back to its owner. The road leading to the old man's small house lay tucked away at the edge of a quiet village, winding past rows of ancient trees that had shed most of their leaves. The surroundings were so still that each of Hùng footsteps rang clearly on the dry ground, as if the silence itself were forcing him to slow down, to think more carefully about what he was about to do. Inside Hùng, there was not so much nervousness as a quiet, contemplative feeling, like standing before something that seemed ordinary on the surface, yet carried far deeper meaning beneath. When he met the owner of the wallet, Hung returned it with care and politeness, the same way he approached everything in life, never allowing himself to be careless, no matter how small the matter. The elderly man received the wallet with trembling hands, his thin fingers gripping it tightly as if afraid that this familiar object might slip away from him again. His eyes flickered with surprise, then gradually softened, glistening with an unmistakable sense of relief, as though a heavy burden he had carried for days had finally been lifted. He thanked Hung again and again, his voice low and hoarse, slow but deeply sincere, as if he were not only grateful for the wallet's return, but for something more profound, as though a precious piece of his memories had been preserved intact. As the old man opened the wallet to check his documents, Hung inadvertently noticed an old photograph carefully kept in a small inner pocket. The photo had faded with time, its edges worn, some corners slightly bent from being handled so often. Even so, the image of the child remained quite clear, bright, innocent eyes and a youthful face, bearing the unmistakable purity of a long-gone era. Hung did not ask right away. He simply looked at it once more, then again, as a strange sense of familiarity slowly welled up inside him, vague yet persistent, like an old memory accidentally stirred. Noticing Hung's restrained but curious gaze, the old man let out a soft sigh and began to speak. His voice grew heavier, each word carrying weight, as if touching upon a pain he had hidden for a very long time, so long that even he no longer remembered when he had first learned to live with it. He said the child in the photo was his granddaughter, who had gone missing more than 20 years ago. Back then, during a crowded festival, a single moment of inattention was enough for the child to disappear into the sea of people. By the time they realized it, it was too late. Their frantic calls were swallowed by the surrounding noise, and from that moment on, the child never returned. His family searched for her for a long time. They asked everywhere, from bustling markets to nearby regions, from old acquaintances to complete strangers. Every tiny clue was clung to like a ray of hope, but eventually, everything faded into silence. As the years passed, hope thinned along with them, leaving only this old photograph, which he kept close as a reminder, as a fragile belief that the child might still be alive somewhere in the world. Each time he opened his wallet and saw the photo, he remembered, wondered, and quietly waited, even though he himself was no longer sure what he was waiting for. The story left Hung deeply unsettled. He listened to every word, missing no detail, yet his mind was constantly drawn back to the face in that photograph. There was something undeniably familiar about it, something close, even though he could not yet name or explain it. The features in the faded image reminded him of Hoài Ca, the calm eyes, the slender bridge of the nose, and the quiet, slightly melancholic aura that seemed to emanate from the small face. The coincidence stirred something within Hung, a subtle unease creeping in, as if an invisible thread were slowly binding together lives that had once seemed entirely unrelated. After that, the old man spoke more about his own life, about the long years he had devoted to practicing traditional herbal medicine. For decades, he had wandered through forests, learning to recognize each plant and each medicinal herb, learning from older healers while also gaining experience through trial and error. His small house held no valuable possessions, only neatly arranged bundles of dried herbs, shelves of prepared remedies, and the faint scent of medicinal plants lingering year-round. Now, with age weighing on him and his strength no longer what it once was, he wished only to find someone with sincerity and affinity to pass on his knowledge, so that the wisdom he had accumulated over a lifetime would not fade away with time. Listening to him, Hung found himself thinking even more. The image of Hoài Ca became vividly clear in his mind, from her diligence and perseverance to her calm, careful nature in even the smallest matters. He suddenly thought about bringing Hoài Ca to meet the old man, not necessarily because of the photograph, but because he hoped she might find a new path, an opportunity to learn and to connect with a profession rich in meaning and long-lasting value. The thought came naturally, like a quiet arrangement of fate, leaving Hùng both hopeful and cautious, unwilling to rush to any conclusions. When he left the small house, the wallet had been returned to its rightful place, but Hùng carried far more with him than before. The story of the lost granddaughter, the faded photograph, and those inexplicably familiar features followed him silently all the way home. He understood that some connections could not yet be named, that some truths needed time to slowly reveal themselves. And from that very moment of quiet stillness, a new undercurrent had begun to flow, silently weaving together stories that once seemed separate, preparing to lead toward deeper changes in the journey ahead. When he returned, Hùng stopped by to see Hoài Ca. The small house nestled quietly in the fading light of early evening, the stillness so complete that even a light step would produce a soft sound. The warm yellow lamp inside had been switched on early, spilling through the low window and casting a familiar, gentle glow across the small yard in front of the house. As soon as he crossed the threshold, Hùng immediately sensed the lingering scent of sugarcane syrup in the air, a sweet, mellow aroma, thick and rich, mixed with a faint smokiness from the stove that had just been put out. It was a scent that evoked a sense of peace hard to put into words, the scent of diligence, of a day spent working without rest, of the most honest and simple things Hoài Ca had preserved all these years. Inside the small house, bottles of sugarcane syrup were neatly lined up on the table, arranged in straight, orderly rows. Under the yellow light, the thick syrup glistened, as if holding within it all the time and effort that had gone into making it. Each bottle had been carefully wiped clean around the rim and tightly sealed, as though even the slightest carelessness might diminish the meaning of the entire process. There was nothing luxurious about the space, just familiar objects, an old wooden table, a small stove darkened by years of use, but together they created a rare sense of calm, a quiet steadiness not always easy to find. Hoài Ca was still tidying up the last few items. She stood by the stove, wiping the tabletop and arranging the pots and pans neatly. When she saw Hùng step inside, she simply turned her head slightly, gave a small nod, and offered a brief smile. No words needed. Between them, a very natural sense of familiarity seemed to have formed. No hurried questions, no unnecessary pleasantries. Hung's presence at that moment felt like part of the daily rhythm of the house, quiet yet indispensable. Hùng sat down on the familiar wooden chair near the table, set his bag aside, and slowly took in the room. Everything looked the same, unchanged, yet the feeling inside him was different. Perhaps it was because of what he had just experienced on his way back, because of the wallet, the old photograph, and the thoughts that still had no place to settle in his heart. After a moment, when Hoài Ca sat down across from him, Hùng finally began to speak. He told the story slowly and carefully, from finding the wallet by the roadside to the journey of returning it to its owner. He spoke of the old man's small house, of the trembling eyes when the lost item was returned, of the way the man carefully opened the wallet as if opening a part of his own memories. Hung's voice was steady, without much rise or fall, yet every word carried clear contemplation, as though he were not only telling Hoài Ca the story, but also retelling it to himself. When Hùng mentioned the old photograph inside the wallet, the atmosphere in the small house seemed to slow. He described the faded photo, the child in it, and the story of a disappearance more than 20 years ago amid the crowded throng of a festival. He spoke of the old man's long years of waiting, of how he kept the photo close as a fragile belief, even as time had worn away nearly all hope. At certain moments, Hung paused briefly, as if choosing his words carefully, weighing how much was enough to say. Hoài Ca listened without interrupting. Her hands continued to pour syrup into the unfinished bottles, each movement slow and steady, as though the familiar task helped her maintain her inner balance. The soft sound of syrup flowing into the bottles blended with the quiet of the room, so clear it felt as if each drop could be counted. When Hung mentioned the strange coincidence that the face in the old photo somehow reminded him of her, Hoài Ca paused slightly. It was only a brief moment. Her hand stopped mid-motion, her gaze lowered just a fraction. Then she quickly continued, as if nothing had been said. The silence was not heavy, yet it carried an indescribable feeling, like a thin thread that had briefly trembled before being hidden again. The conversation continued while both of them carried on with ordinary tasks. Hung stood up to help Hoài Ca arrange the filled bottles, carefully wiping each lid clean. Together, they tidied up and then prepared a late meal. The meal itself was simple, nothing elaborate, but it was made in a rare state of ease, unhurried, without pressure. While waiting for the rice to cook, the conversation gradually shifted to more familiar matters. What crops to plant on the riverside land next season, whether this year's harvest had been good or bad, and the fluctuating prices that kept farmers constantly uneasy. They spoke of the future in very practical terms, without lofty dreams, just enough to keep going and continue striving. Amid that quiet, ordinary rhythm, Hung occasionally found himself looking at Hoài Ca a little longer. It was not a probing or suspicious gaze, but the look of someone carrying too many unorganized thoughts within. The story of the wallet, the faded photograph, and those familiar features kept circling in his mind, even though he did not mention them again. A silent question slowly took shape in his heart, not loud, not urgent, yet impossible to dismiss. Could Hoài Ca be connected in some way to the child who had gone missing all those years ago? The question existed like an underground current, flowing quietly beneath the calm surface of the evening. Hoài Ca seemed to sense that unusual heaviness as well. She did not ask, did not probe. She simply cleaned up after the meal, placing everything back in its proper place. The way she did everything remained careful and orderly, just as she faced life itself, maintaining outward calm while keeping deeper matters to herself. The yellow light continued to bathe the small house, wrapping the two people sitting across from each other in a sense of closeness and warmth, as though any distance between them had been quietly shortened by unspoken understanding. That evening closed in the quiet peace of human warmth, of simple sharing and silent companionship. No answers were spoken, no conclusions reached, yet in each of their hearts, new thoughts had begun to form, along with connections that could not yet be named. The warmth was still there, but alongside it grew a slow, smoldering curiosity, gently spreading, promising deeper changes that would gradually be revealed in the journey ahead, as seemingly scattered pieces began to find their place.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình nhé. Hôm nay thì mình đang làm video tiếp mọi người. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều vì đã luôn theo dõi và ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhé. Bây giờ thì mình mới đang mình đang tải video lên và mình sẽ đăng vào tối hôm nay. Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo và hãy đón xem những video tiếp theo ở trên kênh của mình nhé.
Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel.
Giờ mới xuất xong đây mọi người. Cái tên đó. Cảm ơn mọi người, hẹn gặp lại nhé.